Chapter 46, The Compromise. Sylvia. Samuel moved to his own chair, suddenly looking every bit of his 63 years as he sat down slowly on the chair, dropping his cane by the side as he said, "At least tell Xenois that you've invited them to the family dinner as well. Give him a chance to prepare, to talk to Lumina beforehand, and for them to know what they are walking into." "Absolutely not." I sat down across from him, leaning forward as I pressed on. "If I tell him that I had invited Sophia and her son Riley, he'll find some excuse to uninvite them from coming to the dinner. He will insist that they aren't family. He'll say it's too soon, too complicated, too whatever. He'll choose the path of least resistance, like he always does. Maybe because he knows his wife better than you do. Maybe he knows this will upset her. Maybe he needs to stop tiptoeing around her feelings and start thinking about what's best for his son." I stood up as I started moving towards the fireplace where family photos lined the mantel. My eyes lingered on the last picture we'd taken with Xena, just weeks before her death. "Olivero deserves better than what he's getting, Samuel. He deserves a stable home with parents who actually love each other." "And you think Sophia can provide that?" he asked, sounding resigned about the whole thing. "I think Sophia has already provided that for her own son. Have you seen Riley? From what I've heard, he's polite, well-behaved, and intelligent. He is everything that a mother could want in a child. You've never even met him. I will on Saturday, tomorrow, and so will you." I turned back to face him, crossing my arms. "I'm not changing my mind about this, Samuel. Dinner is happening and Sophia and Riley will be there." He stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head as he muttered bitterly, "This is going to blow up in your face, Sylvia. Mark my words." "We'll see," I said, turning around to focus elsewhere, hereby ending the conversation. After Samuel left, I remained in my study as I focused on something else. I was already planning Saturday's menu and seating arrangements, trying to figure out where to keep everyone. It would need to be perfect. It had to be elegant enough to impress Sophia, but also comfortable enough to put young Riley at ease. The more I thought about it, the more excited I became. This was too good and cute for me. Two little boys, practically the same age, growing up together as brothers. It was almost cute, really. Oliver had been so lonely since he was an only child, and his parents' marriage was unraveling slowly, not that it even mattered, because they weren't in love. And with how the tension in that family was, he had become so withdrawn. Having a brother his age that pulls him out of his shell might be exactly what he needed. And Riley, poor little thing, growing up without a father, at this tender age where everyone needed both parents to love a child. Every boy needed a strong male role model, someone to teach him how to be a man. Xenois would be perfect for that role, once he was free to embrace it fully, without feeling guilty about offending his wife. His wife, who was nothing short of a criminal at this point. I picked up my phone and started making a list of things to buy for the weekend that was fast approaching. There were a lot of things that needed to be bought. New clothes for the boys, perhaps matching outfits for the dinner, some toys they could share, books they could read together. I wanted them to feel like brothers from the very first moment. I could already picture them running through the gardens together, playing in the treehouse Samuel had built for Olivero, sharing secrets and adventures the way brothers should, the way Xenois and his brother had before cancer took him too young. My phone buzzed with a text from my personal shopper. What size clothing for the additional child? I paused, realizing I didn't know Riley's exact measurements at all, and I didn't want to call Sophia to ask for something like this. She would only insist that it wasn't a big deal. But he was 5, same as Oliver, so they were probably close to the same size. I texted back, same as Oliver. And please pick up some toys suitable for both boys, things they can play with together. Within minutes, she responded with a list of suggestions that was age-appropriate and safe for the boys to play with. Building blocks, art supplies, a train set, some board games appropriate for their age group. I approved everything, enough adding a few extras I thought they might enjoy as well. Samuel thought I was meddling, but he was wrong. I was orchestrating. There was a difference. Meddling was interfering in something that was working fine on its own, which was different. Orchestrating was taking a situation that was already broken by someone else entirely and finding a way to fix it. Xenoa's marriage had been broken for years. Anyone with eyes could see that. I was simply providing an alternative to a happy marriage and life. A better alternative. I pulled out my laptop and started researching activities for the boys. Maybe we could take them to the new children's museum that had opened in town, or to the park with the elaborate playground. I wanted them to have fun together, to bond naturally without feeling forced by the adults. My phone rang again. Probably Samuel calling to lecture me some more about playing fair and stepping aside from issues like this and letting people make their own choices. But when I looked at the screen, it was my personal shopper. Mrs. Blackwood, I've put together everything on your list, but I wanted to confirm, you said matching outfits for the boys? For a family dinner? Yes, that's right. Something nice but not too formal. I want them to look like brothers. There was a pause. Brothers, ma'am? Well, step-brothers, soon to be anyway. I smiled, already seeing how perfect they would look sitting side by side at my dining room table. They're going to be such a beautiful family, don't you think? Of course, ma'am. I'll have everything delivered by Friday afternoon. Perfect. Thank you, Marie. Chapter 47. Family Obligations. Xenoas. The next morning came with a gray sky that matched my mood perfectly, because I wasn't feeling great at all. I'd barely slept, tossing and turning in our bed all night long, while Lumina remained in the guest room, and I couldn't hear anything from that room. Every time I'd close my eyes and try to rest, I would see flashes of yesterday's chaos. Sophia's screams, the smell of burning flesh, Lumina's face that was filled with rage and satisfaction. I found myself in the kitchen earlier than usual, making coffee monotonously while my mind was going through everything that had happened. The familiar routine of grinding beans and measuring water should have been soothing to me and calm me down, but instead, it only reminded me of where Lumina had attacked Sophia just 24 hours ago. Daddy? Ollie's small voice broke through my thoughts as I raised my head up, surprised to see him there. It was barely 7 a.m., and he was already up, and I didn't hear him come in at all. He stood in the doorway, still in his pajamas, his dark hair sticking up at odd angles, a sign that he just rolled up from bed now. Morning, buddy, I said as I forced a smile on my face to make him comfortable, and I was very grateful for the distraction, as I needed one at the moment. You're up early. Couldn't sleep, he said as he climbed onto one of the breakfast stools, swinging his legs freely underneath the table as he added, Bad dreams. My heart clenched with pain and a bit of anger at this confession as I got closer to him and said in a softer tone, Want to talk about them? He shook his head, but I could see the little sleep bags underneath his eyes. Whatever he'd dreamed about, it had shaken him so badly that he didn't bother trying to sleep again. I made a mental note to ask Lumina about it later, if we were still speaking to each other. How about some pancakes? I suggested, hoping to brighten his mood with it. The ones with the dinosaur chocolate chips you like? His face lit up slightly, hearing this as he nodded his head slowly. Can I help? Of course. We worked together in comfortable silence, as Ollie was standing on a chair beside me as he carefully measured ingredients into the mixing bowl. It felt normal, peaceful even, doing an activity with my son, it feeling like the most natural feeling in the world until Lumina appeared in the doorway. She looked exhausted. There were also dark circles under her eyes, and her usually perfect hair was hanging scattered across her shoulders. She'd changed into a simple sweater and jeans, but there was something that looked so defeated in her posture that made my chest beat faster with guilt. Morning, she said quietly, her eyes not quite meeting mine as she focused on Ollie, giving him a bright smile. Morning, I said as I handed her a cup of coffee, our fingers touching briefly as she took it. For just a moment I caught a hint of her scent. It was faint but still there. My wolf stirred, confused by the mixed signals we were getting. Mama, Ollie said as he launched himself from his chair into her arms. We're making pancakes. I can see that. She hugged him tightly, and I saw some of the tension leave her shoulders. Whatever was happening between us, Ollie was still her anchor to everything. They smell delicious, she commented, looking at them. They are delicious, I said as I started putting out the breakfast for everyone as Lumina helped me. We ate breakfast quietly, Lumina and I faking a facade that we weren't fighting to give Ollie a normal morning. He chatted about his plans for the day, his upcoming school project, anything but what had happened yesterday. Smart kid. He could sense the tension between his parents even if he didn't understand it. Speaking of plans, I said, wiping syrup from Ollie's chin gently as he giggled, pulling away to eat more pancakes. We have that dinner at Grandma and Grandpa's house tonight. Remember? I said, looking at Ollie as I felt Lumina tense up a bit by my side. Ollie's face immediately fell, hearing this as he looked downcasted. Do we have to go? I frowned at this. Usually he loved visiting my parents and asked when he could see them all the time. They spoiled him shamelessly, giving him all he asked for, and he adored the attention. Of course we do. It's a family dinner. Why wouldn't you want to go? He shrugged as he became very interested in cutting his pancakes into perfect squares and not looking at anyone as he mumbled underneath his breath. Just don't feel like it. Ollie? I used my gentle but firm fatherly tone as I prodded gently for more information. What's wrong? You love going to see Grandma and Grandpa. I know. His voice was small. But what, baby? Lumina leaned forward, her maternal instincts towards our son greater than our marital problems, as she wanted to help me in finding out what was wrong. You can tell us. Ollie glanced between us, then back down at his plate. Nothing. Never mind. I exchanged a look with Lumina. This wasn't like him. Ollie was usually an open book, and he was always eager to share his thoughts and feelings with us, sometimes giving us a running commentary. This sudden reluctance from him to open up to us was concerning. Buddy, if something's bothering you about going to Grandma and Grandpa's house, you need to tell us, I pressed gently. They're nice to me, he said carefully, as if choosing his words to not put blame on anyone. They always give me presents and let me stay up late. That's good, right? Yeah. Another pause before he shook his head as he played with his fingers. But sometimes when they think I'm not looking. What, sweetheart? Lumina's voice was barely audible even to me. Ollie looked up at her, his young face serious and squeezed in pain and anger. Sometimes they look at you funny, Mama, like they don't like you very much. The silence that followed was loud as nobody knew what to say. I felt Lumina gasp at my side and I turned to look at her. Lumina's face went pale and I felt a surge of anger at my parents. Not because Ollie was wrong, he wasn't, but because their feelings had apparently been obvious enough for a 5-year-old to notice. Chapter 48, Unwanted Calls. Zeno is. Ollie, I said carefully, thinking of what to say that wouldn't put my parents in a bad light in his eyes. Grandma and Grandpa love our whole family. Sometimes adults have complicated feelings about things that happen between some people, but that doesn't mean I don't want to go. His voice was suddenly stronger, more determined, as he shook his head adamantly and gripped on tight to his cutleries as he added with puppy eyes. Please, Daddy, can't we just stay home and watch cartoons instead? I looked at my son's pleading face and felt torn apart. Part of me wanted to give in, to spare him the discomfort of experiencing whatever hostility my parents might show toward his mother. But another part of me knew that canceling would only make things worse in the long run, and my mum wasn't someone that liked when things didn't go her way. I'm sorry, Ollie, but we have to go to the house for the dinner. It's already been planned, and it would be rude to cancel now, and we wouldn't want to hurt Grandpa and Grandma feelings. I reached over and ruffled his hair slowly as I added it as a negotiation. But I promise we won't stay too late, okay? And maybe afterward we can stop for ice cream on the way home. Ollie sighed dramatically, but nodded his head after thinking about it hard. Okay, but I'm bringing my tablet. Fair enough, I said, nodding my head. It was better than nothing at this point. My phone buzzed on the counter, and I glanced at it. Sophia's name appeared on the screen, and I felt my stomach fill with dread. Not now. Not with Lumina sitting right there and Ollie still thinking about the hostility that he had picked up on at my parents' house. I let it go to voicemail, focusing on my breakfast. Who was that? Lumina asked, though her tone suggested she already knew who it was and was asking for mere formalities. Nobody important. I took another sip of coffee, avoiding her eyes. The phone rang again almost immediately. Same number. Answer it, Lumina said quietly. We both know you're going to anyway. I looked at her, surprised by the resignation in her voice. She was right, though. If I didn't answer now, I'd just spend the rest of the morning wondering what Sophia wanted. "Excuse me," I said, to her, picking up the phone and stepping into the living room for some semblance of privacy. "Hello? Zenois? Thank goodness you answered." Sophia's voice was soft and sounding quite breathless on the phone. "I was starting to worry that something was wrong when you didn't pick up the first time. Sorry, I was having breakfast with my family. What can I do for you?" I said, glancing at the dining table as I saw Lumina talking with Ollie, who seemed to be smiling about something. "I hope I'm not bothering you. I had a really rough night. The pain in my hand was too much and it kept waking me up. And when I did sleep, I had these awful nightmares that kept on showing me what happened." She paused, and I could hear her take a shaky breath as she exhaled and said, "I was wondering if you might be free to come over for a little while. I could really use the company. And Riley's been asking about you as well." I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar tug of guilt and responsibility that was present in my stomach. She had been traumatized by my wife. The fair thing was to go check up on her and make sure that she was okay. But I also knew what Lumina would think if I left now to go comfort another woman, especially after the conversation we had last night. "Sophia, I'm sorry, but I can't today. We have a family commitment tonight, dinner at my parents' house. I need to spend the day with Ollie and Lumina, maybe try to work through some of what happened yesterday." "Oh." The disappointment in her voice was present as she cleared her throat before continuing in a distant tone. "Of course. I understand. Family comes first. It's not that... No, really, it's fine. I shouldn't have called. It's just that this morning when I was changing the bandages, seeing how bad the burn really is." Her voice broke slightly as she started sounding like she was in tears. "I keep thinking about how it happened. You know, the look in her eyes. I've never seen hatred like that before." Guilt twisted in my stomach. "Sophia, I'm sorry. I don't want to put you in the middle of anything. I know this situation is complicated enough without me adding to it." She sighed softly as she kept quiet for a few moments as she seemed to be thinking about something before she added, "Maybe it would be better if Riley and I just kept our distance for a while, until things settle down." "No." The word came out forcefully than I had intended as I clenched the phone tight, gritting my teeth as I felt an unexplainable need to make sure that Sophia was doing all right, like a compulsion. "Don't do that. Don't let what happened drive you away. But if my being here is causing problems in your marriage, my marriage problems aren't your fault," I said as I glanced back toward the kitchen, where I could see Lumina helping Ollie clean up his breakfast dishes. They were already done with breakfast. "What Lumina did yesterday was wrong, regardless of the circumstances. You don't deserve to be punished for her actions." "Thank you for saying that. It means a lot." Her voice warmed slightly. I wish things could be different, simpler. So do I." There was silence for a while as I could hear the unspoken words that she was not saying at the moment, about if things had been different, if we had a choice to pick who we wanted. "I should let you go," she said finally, clearing her throat. "Enjoy your family dinner." "Sophia? Yes? Take care of that hand, okay? If it gets worse, don't hesitate to go back to the doctor." "I will. Thank you, Zenois, for everything." After she hung up, I stood in the living room for a moment, staring at my phone. Every instinct I had in me was telling me to go to her, but the rational thought in my head reminded me that doing so would only make things worse with Lumina, and that was bad for my marriage. "Everything okay?" Lumina's voice startled me as I didn't hear her coming at all. I turned around to see her. She was standing in the doorway, watching me with an unreadable expression on her face. "Fine. She just wanted to check in about her hand." "And did she ask you to come over?" I hesitated, and that was answer enough. "But you said no," she continued, sounding surprised as well that I had denied Sophia's request. Was she really that confident that I would go once Sophia asked? "Of course I said no. We have plans today." She studied my face for a long moment. "You wanted to say yes, though. It wasn't a question, and I couldn't bring myself to lie to her. Part of me did. Yes, she's hurting, and I feel responsible. Because of what I did. Because of what happened in our house, yes. Lumina nodded slowly, processing this as she searched my face for answers before she shrugged her shoulders. Thank you for staying. Lumina, I know you didn't do it for me, she said quietly. You did it because it was the right thing to do. But thank you anyway. Before I could respond, she turned and walked back toward the kitchen, leaving me alone. Chapter 49, Family Reunion. Lumina. The drive to Xenoise's parents' penthouse felt a little less than a joyride and more like traveling to my own execution. I sat in the passenger seat, watching the familiar streets of Silver Creek pass me by in a blur, while my stomach was filled with a mixture of dread at the upcoming visit and also resignation because there was nothing that I could do about it. In the back seat, Ollie was very quiet, his tablet forgotten in his lap as he stared out the window with the same worried expression I felt that was present on my own face. Xenoise hadn't spoken much during the 20-minute drive, his hands gripping the steering wheel with a lot of unnecessary force. The tension between us from this morning's conversation still lingered, and it was only made worse by the phone call from Sophia that he'd tried to hide from me. But he had no luck there. I knew he'd wanted to go to her, to comfort her and check on her injuries. The fact that he'd chosen to stay home with his family instead should have made me feel better, but somehow it only made me feel more pathetic. That Xenoise probably thought that I would lose it like I did last time, and he seemed to be doing me a favor. We're here, Xenoise announced, which was unnecessary. As I tensed immediately, he pulled into the circular driveway of his parents' building. I smoothed down my dress, a full blue navy gown that I'd chosen specifically to avoid giving Sylvia any ammunition about my appearance, and checked my reflection in the side mirror. I looked tired, which was accurate as I felt, and stressed, which was an understatement. But I looked presentable enough not that Sylvia would care. Remember what we talked about, Xenoise said quietly, his eyes meeting mine in the rearview mirror as he seemed a bit worried about what I would do. Tonight is about family, about spending time with my parents and letting them see Ollie. What he didn't say, but what we both understood, was try not to give them any more reasons to hate you than they already have. Of course, I replied, forcing a smile for Ollie's benefit as I said in a cherry tone. We're going to have a lovely evening with Grandma and Grandpa. Ollie didn't look convinced, but he silently gathered his tablet that he insisted on bringing and climbed out of the car when Xenoise opened his door. The three of us walked to the private elevator that would take us directly to the penthouse, and I tried to ready myself for the confrontation that was coming. The elevator doors opened slowly to reveal Samuel Blackwood, who was waiting for us in the foyer, his black hair with streaks of silver that was perfectly styled, and his smile was genuine as he saw his grandson. "There's my boy," Samuel said happily as his arms opened wide, and Ollie ran into them with the genuine happiness that he'd shown all day. "Look how tall you've gotten since last week. I swear you grow an inch every time I see you." "Grandpa!" Ollie giggled as Samuel lifted him up, some of his earlier reluctance melting away in the face of unconditional love from his grandfather. Xenoise. Samuel held his son's shoulder gently with his free hand as he took in his look from head to toe as he said, "Good to see you, son." "Dad." Xenoise returned the greeting with a genuine smile as well. He was happy to see his father, especially since he wasn't chanced since he became both a mayor, alpha, and moved out of his family house. Samuel's eyes finally found mine, and I braced myself for the usual cool politeness that he normally sent in my direction as he said, "Lumina, you look lovely tonight." "Thank you, Samuel. Thank you for having us." It was the same kind of polite conversation that we had so many times over the years. It was cordial but distant. Samuel had never actively disliked me the way his wife did, but he'd never gone out of his way to make me feel welcome either, as a part of him still looked at me for being responsible for the death of his daughter Xena. I was tolerated, as I was a necessary person that was involved in his son's life, and also his grandson, but I was never truly embraced as family. "Where's my mother?" Xenoise asked Samuel, who dropped Ollie down gently on the ground as he answered. "Kitchen, probably. She's been looking forward to seeing you all day. You know how she gets when she's hosting." We made our way through the familiar halls of the penthouse, walking towards the living room. The sound of Sylvia's voice reached us before we saw her, as we heard her giving instructions to someone about place settings and wine that should be brought out for tonight's meal, as well as children's juice. When we entered the main living area, I found her directing 2 members of the household staff, looking very bit a military general. She was definitely someone who was well acknowledged and respected as a previous Luna before she retired. "Xenois, darling." Sylvia turned toward us, her face brightening up with genuine joy as she caught sight of her son. She was dressed perfectly as always, wearing a cream-colored silk blouse and tailored slacks that probably cost more than my monthly salary had when I was still working. "And my precious grandson." She swept Ollie up in a hug that was all grandmother's joy at seeing her only grandson as she beamed from ear to ear. "Did you miss me, sweetheart?" "Yes, Grandma," Ollie replied, and I could hear the smile in his voice as he nodded his head slowly. "I have something special for you after dinner," she whispered, loud enough for all of us to hear as she winked at him and added in a singing tone. "But it's a surprise." Sylvia's attention then turned to Xenois, and I watched as her expression shifted to one of maternal affection and concern as she touched his face gently and said, "You look tired, dear. Are you getting enough sleep? Eating properly?" "I'm fine, Mother. Just busy with work." Chapter 50. The Ambush. Lumina. Her green eyes studied his face for a while, taking in details that only a mother would notice about their child before looking away as she said in a serious tone, "We'll discuss this later, when we are alone and don't have any disturbance. You need to take better care of yourself." Finally, her eyes landed on me. The warmth that had been present for her son and grandson were gone instantly and quickly replaced by the cool indifference that had defined our relationship for the past 6 years. She didn't speak to me, didn't acknowledge my presence beyond a brief nod that somehow managed to show both recognition and dismissal at the same time. "Sylvia?" I said politely, refusing to let her rudeness go completely unaddressed as I added in a neutral tone. "Thank you for inviting us." She turned away without responding, as if I hadn't spoken at all. Xenois' jaw tightened, seeing this, as he clenched his fists, but he didn't call her out on it. He never did. "Dinner will be ready in about 20 minutes, Sylvia announced to the room in general before turning to face her husband with a smile on her face. "Samuel, why don't you show Xenois that new wine you've been saving? Ollie, would you like to see what I've added to the train set in the playroom?" "Can I, Daddy?" Ollie looked up at Xenois hopefully, waiting for his permission. "Of course, buddy. Just wash your hands first." As Ollie ran off toward the guest bathroom, I found myself standing alone in the middle of the luxurious living room, while the Blackwood family separated and went in different directions to do one thing or another. It was a familiar feeling, this feeling of being an outsider in my husband's family home. I walked aimlessly with no destination in mind, as I made my way toward the floor-to-ceiling windows that showed a stunning view of Silver Creek's downtown district. The city lights were just beginning to twinkle in the growing dark, and for a moment I allowed myself to imagine what it would be like to live somewhere else, a place where I was wanted and acknowledged by people who wanted me. "The table looks beautiful tonight," I heard Samuel comment from across the room. I turned to see him as he was examining the formal dining table, which had been set with the Blackwood family's finest china and crystal. But something was different about the setup. Instead of the usual 5-place settings, there were 7. "Mother," Xenois' voice carried a note of curiosity, noticing the setting as well as he spoke out. "Are we expecting someone else tonight?" Sylvia appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel with excitement scribbled all over her face. "As a matter of fact, we are. I took the liberty of inviting some additional guests." "Additional guests?" Xenois frowned, his brows furrowing in concentration as he tried to guess who it would be but wasn't getting any answers yet. "Who?" Before Sylvia could answer, the sound of the private elevator chimed through the penthouse. "That would be them now," Sylvia said, her voice filled with satisfaction as she hurried toward the foyer to welcome the new visitors on directly. I heard the elevator doors open, followed by the sound of voices, one I recognized with a sinking heart as I felt my heart sink, and it was accompanied by another voice that was smaller, younger. "Sophia, darling!" Sylvia's voice was loud enough to be heard clearly from the entrance. "And you, handsome fella, must be the lucky Riley. Oh my goodness, aren't you handsome and quite similar to Ollie? Come in, come in! Welcome home!" The blood drained from my face as the full picture of Sylvia's betrayal became clear. She had invited Sophia and Riley to family dinner without telling any of us, planning this confrontation with the careful precision of someone who knew exactly what chaos she was unleashing. Xenois looked stunned, his face shifting through a lot of emotions at the same time: confusion, anger, and what might have been panic. Samuel appeared genuinely saddened by this, which told me he hadn't been part of his wife's planning. "What the hell is she doing?" Xenois muttered under his breath. But before any of us could react or do anything, Sylvia was leading our uninvited guests into the living room. Sophia looked beautiful, of course. She always did. Tonight she wore a simple black dress that managed to be both elegant and subtly provocative, definitely to catch attention from Xenois, but still appear modest in front of his parents. But it was the little boy beside her that made my breath catch. Riley was dressed in clothes that looked suspiciously new and expensive, and there was something in the way that he held himself. It screamed he didn't want to be here, but he put on a confident look, his smile fixed in place as he curiously looked everywhere, amazed by what he was seeing. "Xenois!" Sophia's face brightened up with what happened to be genuine surprise and delight. "But I knew her better. It was all an act. I had no idea you'd be here tonight. What a wonderful coincidence." The lie was so smoothly delivered that I almost believed it myself. Almost. Sophia. Xenois's voice was neutral, but I could see the confusion and growing anger in his eyes as he looked between his mother and his ex-girlfriend. "This is unexpected." "Oh, didn't Sylvia tell you?" Sophia's expression changed to that of concern as she brushed her dress smoothly as she added, "She invited Riley and me to join your family dinner. I hope that's all right? I can certainly leave if this is inconvenient." "Nonsense," Sylvia interrupted quickly, shaking her head. "You're not going anywhere. This is exactly what this family needs, to increase our circle, to welcome new members with open hearts." New members. The words hit me like physical blows. Sylvia wasn't just planning a dinner party. She was planning some changes in my family, and I was the one who was being replaced. Chapter 51, The Breaking Point. Lumina. The room began to spin all over me as I watched Sylvia lead Sophia and Riley through the penthouse like they were best of friends. The sound of her constant praise for Riley, the way she kept touching Sophia's arm, familiarly showing love and acceptance, it was everything she'd never given me in 6 years of marriage to her son. My chest felt like it was being tight all of a sudden, each breath becoming more difficult as the reality of the situation dawned on me. This wasn't just a surprise invitation. This was a deliberate humiliation planned by Sylvia, who wanted to show me exactly where I stood in this family, and it was at the very bottom, apparently. The voices around me became muffled, distant, as if I were hearing them from underwater as I began to sway from left to right. My vision became blurry, and I felt a familiar panic rising in my throat. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to get away from the sound of Sylvia's happy laughter as she fawned over the woman who she brought here clearly to replace me. Without saying anything to anyone, I turned around and walked toward the guest bedroom that was located down the hall, my legs feeling unsteady beneath me. The Persian rug in the hallway seemed to move places and get blurry in front of me, and I had to put one hand against the wall to keep myself upright so that I wouldn't collapse. "Lumina?" Xenois's voice sounded like it was coming from far away, but I could hear the concern in it. I heard footsteps, followed behind me, quick and with purpose. "Lumina? Wait." I made it to the guest bedroom just as my legs gave out completely. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my hands shaking, as well as I tried to catch my breath. "Hey." Xenois's voice was suddenly much closer, gentle and worried as I tried to see him through my blurry vision, and I could see the worry and concern etched in there. When was the last time he ever looked at me like this? "Hey, look at me." I felt the bed sink a bit, as well as he sat down beside me, his hand coming to rest on my back. The familiar scent of his cologne, as well as his alpha scent, helped in grounding me to reality a bit, reminding me that I wasn't completely alone in this nightmare. "I can't breathe," I whispered, the words barely loud enough for me to even hear it. "Yes, you can." His hand moved in slow, soothing circles between my shoulder blades. "You're having a panic attack. That is all. I'll help you get back yourself. Just focus on my voice, okay? In and out, nice and slow." He guided me through several deep breaths, his presence a source of comfort for me. Gradually, the spinning sensation seemed to subside, and everything remained in place as I looked around, taking a deep breath and exhaling. This may be over, but the emotional pain, the humiliation and betrayal that Sophia had done to me remained there regardless. "Better?" he asked softly, searching my face for any traces of panic attack that might be left. I nodded slowly, not trusting my voice yet. "Lumina, I swear to you, I had no idea they were coming tonight." His voice was urgent, sounding desperate as he wanted me to believe him. "This is the first I'm hearing about any of this. My mother didn't tell me she'd invited them." I turned to look at him, searching his face for any sign of deception that he might be using to paint himself as the good guy. What I saw there was genuine shock, anger, and something that looked like guilt. But it wasn't the guilt of someone who had been caught in a lie. It was more of the guilt that he had messed up somewhere, and now his family was behaving badly, and he felt responsible for it. "Swear it," I said quietly as I held his hand, squeezing it as I steadied myself and continued speaking. "Swear to me that you didn't know." "I swear." His eyes met mine directly as he refused to look away as he continued speaking. "I swear on my life, on Ollie's life, that I had no idea my mother had invited them tonight. I'm as blindsided by this as you are." The sincerity in his voice, it was real. Whatever else was happening between us, the lack of trust and misunderstanding that seemed to be present in this relationship, whatever complicated feelings he might have for Sophia, he hadn't planned this particular humiliation. "This is cruel," I whispered, shaking my head slowly. "Even for your mother, this is unusually cruel." "I know." His hand found mine, his fingers intertwining with mine in a gesture that felt intimate as he continued, speaking in a gentle tone. "I'm going to talk to her. I'm going to tell her that they need to leave. This was supposed to be a family dinner, and what she's doing to you, it's not acceptable. Xenois. No, I mean it. She can't treat you like this, especially not in front of Ollie. That's not right, no matter what. He's already picking up on the tension in this family. He is already uncomfortable coming here because he knows they hate you. He doesn't need to see his mother being disrespected in his grandparents' home." Before I could respond, the bedroom door opened on its own, without a knock to tell us someone was there. Sylvia stood in the doorway, looking a bit smug. "Is everything all right in here?" she asked, though her tone clearly sounded like she wasn't particularly concerned with the answer. "Sophia was asking where you'd gone, Xenois. It's rather rude to leave your guests unattended." "My guests?" Xenois stood up slowly, his body filled with anger as he clenched his fists tightly as he continued, barely holding on to his emotions. "Since when are they my guests, Mother? I wasn't aware we were having guests at all until they walked through the door." "Oh, didn't I mention it?" Sylvia's smile was smug as she shrugged her shoulders in a nonchalant manner. "I thought I had. Well, they're here now, and it would be terribly impolite to send them away. Sophia has been so looking forward to spending time with family." "They're not family," Xenois said through gritted teeth. "Aren't they? Riley seems to fit right in with our Ollie. And Sophia, well, she's practically one of us already, isn't she?" Chapter 52, The Devil is a Cunning Woman. Sophia. I watched this exchange between mother and son, feeling like I was watching a tennis match, each pointed comment flying back and forth between the players while I sat helplessly on the sidelines. Sylvia's plan was becoming clearer by the moment, replacing me with Sophia as a suitable daughter-in-law, one that she can actually tolerate. "Mother, they need to leave," Xenois said firmly, refusing to back down. Now this was one of the rare times that I had seen Xenois fight his mum on something concerning me. More often, he often let things slide to allow peace to reign. This is inappropriate, and you know it. "Are you going to let your wife control who's welcome in my home, Xenois?" Sylvia's voice got harder as she clenched her fist, sparing me a glance that was filled with absolute hatred that left me on edge a bit. Are you going to let her jealousy and insecurity dictate how this family operates? Is she the breadwinner of this family, Xenois? You are clearly being controlled by her, and you don't even know it. What a shame, she said, shaking her head. I'm not being controlled by anyone, Xenois replied, but I could hear the slight doubt that was creeping in his tone as he pressed on, not letting this slide. This is about respect and common courtesy that Lumina clearly deserves as your daughter-in-law. Lumina doesn't mind them staying, do you, dear? Sylvia turned her focus on me, giving me a smile that left me anything but warm. It was almost as if she was daring me to go against her wishes and suffer the consequences. Either way, she was winning this battle. After all, you're always saying how important it is for the children to have friends. And Riley and Ollie get along so wonderfully. She added a hint of sarcasm in her voice. All eyes turned to me, and I felt the weight of the situation that was weighing heavily on my shoulders as I was trapped. This was it, the moment where I could either fight for my place in this family and ended up being an outcast even more, or step aside gracefully and let Sylvia's plan continue to unfold just exactly as she'd intended. The smart thing here would be to insist that they leave the house immediately, as they were not family, to force Xenois to choose between supporting his wife and appeasing his mother. But I also knew that making that demand would only give Sylvia more fuel in saying bad things about me, being controlling and unreasonable, and justifying it with this situation as her evidence. It's fine, I heard myself say, the words feeling like they were cutting my throat as I spoke them. Bitter for me to say, but I could see Sylvia's triumphant smirk. They can stay. Lumina, no? Xenois started to protest as he stepped towards me, his hand stretched out as I shook my head, stopping him in his movement. It's all right, I said more firmly, looking directly at him, taking a deep breath before I continued speaking. If your mother wants them here for dinner, then they should stay for dinner. There is a child involved that wasn't a part of this mess. There is no need to hurt the child mindlessly. It would be rude to send them away now. Sylvia's smile widened, victorious as she crossed her hand, looking back at Xenois as she gestured with her hand. See, I knew Lumina would understand this sort of thing without even asking her in the first place. She's always been so accommodating. The way she said the word made it sound like a weakness rather than a good thing. I clenched my fists, not allowing myself to be baited by her words. You know, Sylvia continued, moving further into the room, as she seemed to have something that she wanted to say. I was just noticing how similar Riley and Ollie look. The bone structure, their physical appearance. It's almost uncanny, really. Almost as if they came from the same father. The silence that followed was loud enough as I felt my breath catch in my throat. I felt all the blood drain from my face as the implication of her words sank in, my brain processing what she meant at a speed that would have astonished me on a different day. She was actually suggesting that Riley might be Xenois' son, mother. Xenois' voice was quiet, low, dangerous in a way I'd rarely heard before. He was never one who got furious with his mom. Exasperated, sure, but he never lost control whenever he was with her. But it seemed that even Xenois had a limit when it came to his mom as well. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. What exactly are you implying? Oh, nothing specific, darling. Just an observation. Genetics are fascinating, don't you think? She let the sentence trail off, acting innocent, but the insinuation was quite clear. I never cheated on Lumina, Xenois said, each word coming out with an intensity that I didn't expect before. Not before our marriage, not after, not ever. If you're suggesting that I fathered Sophia's son, you're wrong. Of course, dear, I'm sure you're right. But Sylvia's tone suggested she didn't believe him at all, but was only trying to pacify him before he lost control and did something drastic. It must just be fate, then, bringing these two boys together. Two little boys who could practically be twins, if you didn't know better. She moved toward the door, pausing to look back at us with that same satisfied smile. Dinner will be served in 5 minutes. I do hope you'll both join us. It would be such a shame for the children to eat without their parents present. After she left, Xenois and I sat in stunned silence, not saying anything for a while as we both stared at the door, half expecting Sylvia to walk in. "She's lost her mind," Xenois said finally, his voice hollow with shock as he shook his head slowly in disbelief. "She's actually lost her mind." Chapter 53, Dinner from Hell. Lumina. The dining room had never felt more like a battlefield in my life than it did that evening. I sat in my usual chair, the one I always used when coming here for countless family dinners over the past 6 years, but tonight it felt like I was sitting in the enemy's territory. The table was swinging a precise setting, 7 place settings instead of our usual 5, with Sophia, who was seated directly opposite me, and Riley was seated beside Ollie. Samuel had taken his usual place at the table. As the head of the family, although I could see the tension in his shoulders and the way his eyes kept moving between his wife and the rest of us searching for something, it was clear to anyone that would pay attention that he was clearly uncomfortable with whatever game Sylvia was playing, but he wasn't going to call her out on it publicly because she was still his mate first and foremost. Xenois sat beside me, sitting tense as his jaw were gritty together tight enough that I worried he might crack a tooth. He'd barely spoken since we'd left the guest bedroom, and I could feel the anger that was pouring out of him in waves. Whether that anger was directed at his mother, at Sophia, or at the situation in general, I couldn't tell yet. The children, thankfully, seemed oblivious to the tension that was happening around the table. Ollie was speaking quietly to Riley about his favorite video games, as he was a bit more social to Riley as they met before in our house. His friendliness was working hard in overriding any of the quiet reservations he'd said earlier about coming tonight. Riley, for his part, was responding in single words and double words sometimes, as his attention was focused intently on the meal that was in front of him. "This lamb is so good, Sylvia," Sophia said, breaking the silence that had settled over the table. "You'll have to give me the recipe." "Oh, it's nothing special," Sylvia replied with false modesty, although she was clearly pleased by the compliment that she got. "Besides, it's just something I picked up during our trip to Provence last year. Cooking has always been a great hobby of mine." I bit back the urge to point out that Sylvia's idea of cooking meant giving detailed instructions to her professional chef, rather than attempting in the preparation herself. Instead, I focused on cutting my food into smaller pieces, trying to pretend I wasn't affected while my stomach was turning me with nausea and anxiety. "Riley, sweetheart, you're being very quiet," Samuel observed gently, leaning forward to catch the little boy's attention as he stopped eating and looked at Samuel with cautious eyes like he was observing something important. "How are you finding your first dinner with us?" Riley's eyes that were so green in an odd way similar to mine, and yet so different from his mother's blue ones. For a moment, something passed quickly across his face. It was an expression I couldn't quite read before he managed a small smile. "It's very nice, sir," he said politely, his voice so low that we had to strain our ears to hear him. "Thank you for having us." "Such beautiful manners," Sylvia gushed happily, beaming at him like he just recited Shakespeare off script as she pressed a hand against her chest in blatant adoration as she turned to Sophia. "Sophia, you've done such a wonderful job raising him. It can't have been easy, doing such a stressful job all on your own all these years." The comment hung in the air as I could feel Xenois tense beside me as Sophia beamed at the praise as she responded. "It has been challenging," Sophia admitted, sounding vulnerable to garner sympathizers to her side. "Especially in those first few years after my mate passed. Riley was so young, barely 2, and there were times when I wondered if I was strong enough to give him everything he needed." "A child needs both parents," Sylvia said, her tone filled with hidden meaning as her eyes glanced briefly at Xenois. "A strong father figure is so important for a young boy's development." "I couldn't agree more," Sophia replied smoothly. "Riley has been asking about his father lately. He sees his friends with their fathers and—" She trailed off, shaking her head as if trying to dismiss the thought. "But we manage. We have each other, and that's enough." It was a beautiful performance, really, for even I found myself almost sympathizing with her fate, and I knew exactly what game she was playing here. "Well, you don't have to manage alone anymore," Sylvia said with an amount of confidence that showed that she was certain of what, reaching across the table to pat Sophia's uninjured hand. Now that you're back in Silver Creek, you have family here who are solidly behind you no matter what happens. We'll make sure you have all the support you need. That's incredibly kind of you, Sophia said, her eyes filled with what might have been genuine tears, or maybe she was just that good at manipulation. I've felt so isolated and alone since coming back here to start a new life for me and my son. It's wonderful to know there are people who care about Riley's well-being as well as mine, and promises to keep an eye on us. Of course we care, Sylvia replied warmly, beaming at her. Speaking of which, have you given any thought to Riley's education? A bright boy like him needs to be in a good school with his friends so that he doesn't miss anything important. Actually, I've also been a lot fortunate in that regard, Sophia said, as I caught a pleased look on her face that suggested satisfaction with what she was saying. I was able to secure Riley a spot at Silver Creek Elementary. In fact, he'll be starting this Monday. Chapter 54, Perfect Similarities. How wonderful! Sylvia clapped her hands, beaming at her words, as she nodded her head approvingly. Hell, Sophia could vomit, and Sylvia would call it an achievement in her eyes. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes as Sylvia added, "That's such a coincidence, that's where Ollie goes to school." "Is it really?" Sophia spoke as she seemed genuinely surprised by it, but I knew better than to be taken by her false acting. Well, that is lucky in my situation. He won't be alone in his new school. I was hoping Riley would be able to make friends quickly, and it sounds like he already has one. Actually, Sophia continued, as she glanced at the two boys who were still engaged in their own private conversation. The principal mentioned to me that there might be space in Ollie's specific class. Apparently, they're the same age and at the same grade. It would be wonderful if they could be in the same classroom. Riley would feel so much more comfortable having a familiar face around as he navigates a new chapter in his life. My blood ran cold hearing these words from her mouth. The same class. She was doing everything possible to have her son in the same classroom as mine, making sure that they would be seeing each other daily instead of this once-in-a-while perfectly planned dinner. Oh, that would be perfect, Sylvia exclaimed, turning to Xenois with a bright smile as she spoke to her son. Darling, you'll have to make some calls tomorrow. Make sure the school understands how important it is for these boys to be together. Mother, Xenois started, but Sylvia cut him off with a wave of her hand, shaking her head as if realizing that he was going to protest about this. No arguments. These children have formed such a sweet friendship already. Just look at them having fun together. It would be cruel to separate them now, wouldn't it, Ollie? Our son looked up from his conversation with Riley, his face furrowed in confusion at being included in the adult discussion. What, Grandma? I was just telling everyone how excited you must be that Riley will be going to your school, maybe even in your same class. Really? Ollie turned to Riley with genuine enthusiasm as he nodded his head. That would be so cool. We could sit together at lunch and play together at recess and... That sounds wonderful, buddy, Xenois interrupted gently, although I could hear the strain in his voice that told me he wasn't happy with this one bit. We'll see what we can arrange. I found my voice at last as I cleared my throat and spoke up. Wouldn't it be better for Riley to have his own classroom at first? To find his own friends and establish himself and his identity at school? Sometimes being paired up right away can make him get adjusted to school life even harder. The table fell silent, and I felt all eyes turn to me. Sylvia's expression had changed to one of disapproval as she rolled her eyes at me, while Sophia looked hurt and confused. I appreciate your concern, Lumina, Sophia said carefully, trying to garner sympathy from Sylvia as usual, but Riley has always been quite adaptable, no matter the circumstances he has been thrown in. That's one of his many remarkable qualities. And given how well he and Ollie get along, I think having a friend nearby would actually make the transition easier for him. Of course it would, Sylvia agreed quickly, shooting me a glare that clearly showed what exactly she thought about my interference. Children are known to thrive and excel better when they feel supported and connected than being secluded and alone, and often the victim of bullies. It's only natural that these two boys would want to stay together, given that they know each other. Riley himself hadn't said anything during this entire conversation that seemed to be revolving around him and Ollie, and I knew he was listening in. He sat quietly beside Ollie, pushing food around his plate without eating much, and his expression remained blank and unreadable. There was something about his attitude that struck me as odd. Not shy, exactly, but almost. Disconnected from everything that was going on. Like he was physically present, but mentally somewhere else entirely. "Riley, sweetheart," I found myself saying, addressing him directly for the first time that evening. "Are you excited about starting at a new school?" He looked up at me with those piercing green eyes, and for just a moment I saw something flash there, in a way that made my skin crawl with something bad as I looked away and looked back at him, wondering if I was being paranoid. But it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "Yes, ma'am," he said politely, a far change from the happy boy that I had seen in the grocery store. The first time we met, and he was excited to meet with Ollie. "I'm looking forward to learning new things." "He's always been gifted," Sophia said proudly, her hand moving to rest on Riley's shoulder as she continued speaking. "His previous teachers all said he was reading well above his grade. I think he'll fit right in with the advanced programs at Silver Creek Elementary." "Ollie's in the advanced reading group too," Sylvia said, nodding her head with satisfaction as she gestured to them. "See, they're perfectly matched. It's almost like fate brought them together." Fate. That was the same word that she'd used earlier when making her disgusting comment about Riley's real father might be. I felt Xenois tense beside me again, and I quickly reached under the table to place my hand on his thigh, silently pleading with him to stay calm. The rest of dinner passed quickly, with Sophia and Sylvia discussing her future plans, while making it clear that the Blackwood family stood ready to provide whatever support she might require. Samuel made polite contributions to the conversation, but remained quiet, his discomfort with the situation becoming more apparent as the evening kept on going. And worse of all, there was nothing I could do to stop this from happening. Chapter 55, The Unraveling. "Zeno, the tension at dinner has been too much, and it felt suffocating even to me. There were forced smiles and polite exchanges that were being exchanged through the dinner, and it kept piling on a shaky foundation. When we were finally done with dessert, I knew I couldn't let this petty charade continue any longer without addressing what was happening here. "Sophia," I said, standing from my chair, slowly keeping calm as I looked at her, "could I speak with you privately for a moment?" Her eyes brightened up with that looked dangerously like hope as she beamed happily, nodding her head. "Of course!" "Perfect!" Mother spoke up before I could say anything else to her, as she took lead once more and said, "You two go have your chat. Lumina, dear, why don't you help me with the dishes? We can have some girl talk while they handle their business." The way she said girl talk made my skin crawl, especially when I saw the look of pain that crossed Lumina's face. This whole evening had been planned to humiliate my wife from the very start, and Mother was just getting started. "The dishes can wait," I started to protest, trying to stop whatever my mum was planning to do to her, but Lumina was already standing up from her chair as she packed her cutleries away. "It's fine," she said quietly, not meeting my eyes as she shook her head, focusing on the plates. "I don't mind helping." I wanted to argue further about this. I wanted to insist that she shouldn't have to clean up after the dinner she'd never wanted to attend in the first place. But the exhaustion in her voice, the defeated way her shoulders were slumped in, told me that fighting about dishes was the least of our problems right now. "Dad, why don't you take the boys to the playroom?" I suggested, turning to face him as I added, "Show them that new train set Mother mentioned." Samuel nodded gratefully, clearly eager to escape the tension from the room as he grabbed onto his walking stick and got up from his chair, beckoning to the boys. "Come on, boys. I've got something special to show you." Ollie jumped up excitedly, but I noticed Riley hesitate for just a moment, glancing between his mother and my father with an expression I couldn't quite read. It seemed like he was uncertain if he should go as well, before a nod from his mother had him following Ollie and my father out of the dining room. maybe he was just asking for permission. There was nothing odd about that. As the others quickly scattered to do their various things, leaving the dinner room alone for me and Sophia, I led Sophia toward the balcony, both needing the fresh air and the distance from my family. The moment we stepped outside, she moved closer to me, her hand reaching for my arm. I stepped back instinctively, shrugging off her hand before she could hold me. "What are you doing, Sophia?" I asked, my anger surging out, making my voice harder than I intended. She blinked at me, her expression shifting to an innocent one as she shook her head slowly. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Don't." I held up a hand, already frustrated by the game she was trying to play with me now. "Don't play coy with me. I'm not amused by whatever this is." "This?" She gestured vaguely toward the penthouse as she shook her head before replying. "I was invited to dinner by your mother. I thought it would be nice for Riley to spend time with his new friend." Cut the act. I moved to lean against the balcony railing, putting more distance between us as I added, "You didn't just happen to receive an invitation from my mother. You somehow planned this entire thing. I don't know how, but I had no idea why you and my mum would still keep in touch behind my back." For a moment, I saw her mood shift into something calculating before beaming at me as she said gently, "Maybe I did encourage her a little," she admitted, her voice dropping to a softer tone as she edged closer towards me. "But only because I could see how much you were struggling, Xenois. How unhappy you are." "I'm not unhappy. Aren't you?" She moved even closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume that smelled similarly of my mate's scent. Or maybe it was a coincidence. "I see the way you look at me, the way you've always looked at me. You can't tell me that the spark between us has just disappeared." My hand moved unconsciously to the pendant at my throat, the one that I found on my table all those years ago, with Lumina name taped on it, as I realized that it might have been a gift for me. It was during the time she was giving birth, so we never really did talk much about it afterwards, but it had become something that I cherished. It had become a habit, touching it when I felt stressed or confused. Somehow it always seemed to calm me, to help me think more clearly. We're friends, Sophia, and that's all we'll ever be. I have a wife who doesn't understand you the way I do." She took another step forward, and I realized that I was running out of room to make an escape from her before she caged me. "That's not true." "Isn't it? Look at yourself, Xenois. You're brilliant, powerful, but you're trapped in a marriage that's slowly killing you. I can see it in your eyes." "Stop." The word came out sharper than I'd intended, fueled by a growing anger I couldn't quite explain, as I insisted harshly, "Lumina is my mate. I love her." "It's a lie." Sophia's voice changed, sounding more desperate. "Everything you think you feel for her is a lie you've been telling yourself. What you really want, what you've always wanted, is standing right in front of you." She reached for me again, and this time she was able to touch my chest as I felt something move through me. Like my thoughts were suddenly wrapped in fog. "All you want when you see me is to claim me," she continued, her voice sounding almost hypnotic as she added, "to make me yours the way we were always meant to be. Stop fighting it, Xenois. Stop hiding from what we both know is true." "I love my mate," I said firmly, the words acting like an anchor through the confusion she was trying to create. "I love Lumina, not you." Chapter 56. The Unexpected Sleepover. Xenois. Something flashed across Sophia's face. It was a mixture of different feelings, surprise, anger, and something else that looked almost like panic. For just a moment, I saw the real Sophia before she donned on her mask once more. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice losing her seductive quality as her voice got more urgent as she said, "She'll never be enough for you. Deep down, you and I know that. We have history together. We were in a relationship, and we were happy before you found her. She'll never understand what you need the way I do. This conversation is over," I said, shaking my head as I started to move past her, back toward the sliding door, but she grabbed my arm, stopping me in my tracks. "Xenois, please, let go of me," I said, trying to pull my hand free from her. I didn't like what she was insinuating one bit, and maybe I was the one at fault by giving her a lot of leeway, so she assumed a lot of things. Instead of releasing me, she pulled herself closer, rising up on her toes as if she intended to kiss me. The movement was so sudden and I wasn't expecting it to happen that for a moment I was too shocked to react. Then instinct kicked in and I reacted on the spot. I pushed her away, maybe harder than I'd intended, my wolf responding to what felt like an attack on my mated bond. She stumbled backward, her high heels catching on the uneven stones of the balcony floor. She fell. It wasn't a hard fall, more of a stumble that ended with her sitting on the ground looking shocked and disheveled. But the sound she made, a sound of surprise and pain, carried clearly through the open door. What happened? Dad's voice reached us first, followed by the sound of running footsteps. Within seconds, the balcony was filled with people. Dad was the first to arrive, having heard her scream, and then he was followed by Mother, then Lumina, and finally both boys, who must have heard the commotion and come running despite being told to stay in the playroom. "Sophia!" Mother rushed to her side, kneeling down beside her with genuine concern as she looked around trying to see if she was hurt somewhere. "Are you hurt? What happened?" "I'm fine," Sophia said, but her voice was shaky and I could see how she was planning to use this to her advantage. I tripped. These heels aren't very smart considering the stones that are in this balcony." But her eyes, when they met mine, were full of fury and hurt. Whatever had just happened between us, whatever she'd been trying to accomplish, it had failed spectacularly. "I think it's time for us to go," she said, accepting Mother's help to stand. "Riley, come on, we're leaving." "But Mom..." Riley started to protest, then seemed to catch himself in the moment, his expression showing fear as he slumped in, keeping quiet. "Now, Riley." There was an edge to her voice that made even me uncomfortable. This was a different Sophia than the one who'd been playing the devoted single mother to Sylvia all evening. Riley moved toward her obediently, but something about his body language struck me as odd as I narrowed my eyes in confusion and suspicion. He seemed to be trying to make himself smaller, less noticeable, and when he got close to his mother, I could have sworn I saw him flinch. "Actually," Ollie spoke up from where he was standing beside Lumina as he stepped forward, his voice bright with excitement. "Riley should have a sleepover at our house. We could play games and stay up late and—" "That's not possible," Sophia said firmly, reaching for her son's hand, gripping it tight as she said stubbornly. "We need to get home." "But it would be perfect," Ollie continued. Either he was pretending to be oblivious or genuinely oblivious to the tension around him. "You said you wanted us to bond like brothers, and sleepovers are the best way to do that. Right, Riley?" Riley looked up at his mother, then at Ollie, then back at his mother. Something passed across his small face as he looked away and stared at the ground. I'd like that," he said quietly. "Riley, no, we're going home." Sophia's grip on his hand tightened even more, as I saw Riley gasp quietly, but his face didn't show any emotions at all, like he was used to this kind of pain and aggression from Sophia. "Oh, what a wonderful idea!" Mother clapped her hands together, apparently missing the tension as well as she nodded her head approvingly, like Ollie had found the cure to cancer. "The boys could have a proper sleepover, and you could have a stress-free evening to yourself, Sophia. When's the last time you had a night to just relax?" "I appreciate the offer, but please, Mom." Riley's voice was low, but there was something in it that made all of us pay attention to what he was saying. He sounded too desperate and eager to spend the night despite the surprise he had earlier when Ollie suggested it, which meant that Ollie did it on the spot and it wasn't planned. Sophia stared down at her son, and I watched her face change through a lot of emotions. Anger, frustration, and something that looked almost like fear. "Do you really want to stay?" she asked him, her voice carefully controlled as she raised her eyebrows at him with an intensity that screamed she was warning him of something. Riley nodded, and there was something about the way he did it that sent a chill down my spine. At that moment, he didn't look like a child asking for a sleepover. He looked like someone asking for a sanctuary. And that's when I noticed how immediately his mum let go of him. He walked slowly and positioned himself slightly behind Ollie, as if my son were somehow protecting him. "Well then," Sophia said after a long moment, her smile fixed on her face as she looked at Sylvia, "I suppose that settles it. Which I'll pick him up in the morning," she said, bending down to kiss Riley's forehead. He allowed the gesture that Sophia displayed, but I noticed he didn't lean into it the way children usually did with their mothers. As Sophia left with her purse, I saw Riley watching her closely until she was gone, before breathing a sigh that almost seemed like relief, unaware I was watching him. Something was very wrong here. Chapter 58, Family Moment. Riley. "We'll see about that," Mr. Xenois chuckled, shaking his head like he was exasperated with Ollie, but his voice was warm and happy. It was nothing like the way Mom's voice sounded when she was pretending to be happy. As we drove through the street, heading towards their home, I pressed my face to the window and watched the houses get bigger and prettier, as well as my eyes were wide open with awe as I kept looking even as we passed it by. When we finally turned into the driveway of Ollie's house, I felt my breath catch in my throat. I'd been here before, just a few days ago, when Mom had arranged that playdate place that she made me wear the glove to use and shake Ollie's hand. Before, in the daytime with all the lights off, it seemed nice but normal like every house was. Now it looked like something from a fairy tale, like a castle where good people lived happily all the time and bad things couldn't happen here. "Wow," I breathed, not meaning to say it out loud as I covered my mouth, wondering if I would get in trouble for speaking without permission. "Pretty cool, right?" Ollie grinned at me as he bumped my shoulders with him gently and added, with a gleam in his eyes, "Wait until you see my room. I have a bunk bed and everything." When the car finally pulled up a stop, Ollie got out and dragged me out, not waiting for his mum to help us. Inside the house, Mrs. Lumina asked us what we wanted to eat for a snack, but I couldn't make my mouth say anything to her, as I was still overwhelmed by how fast everything was changing. Everything felt too big, too bright for me, and very unfamiliar. The house smelled like cookies and something else that was warm and safe, and I didn't want to say the wrong thing and ruin it. "Riley's probably just tired," Ollie said, answering for me as usual as he grabbed my hand and tugged it gently. "Come on, I'll show you my room." He dragged me up the stairs talking about all the things we could do during our sleepover, and he seemed to never be running out of ideas. His room was amazing, with toys everywhere and posters on the walls, and that bunk bed he'd promised that he had. It was big and beautiful. But what I liked most was how it felt lived in and loved, like a real kid's room where things happened. "You can have the top bunk if you want," Ollie offered generously as he pointed at it where I could see that there was a bed already made, although it seemed to be only Ollie that was a kid, or maybe it was for his cousins or something. "Or we could both sleep on the bottom and pretend we're in a fort." "Thanks," I managed to say, though my voice came out smaller than I wanted as I looked around while he pulled me into his playroom, a much smaller room than the one in his grandfather's room. After a while, Mrs. Lumina called us for bath time as she looked at us eagerly as she said, "Since there are two of you tonight, Daddy and I will both help so nobody drowns," she said with a laugh. But when we got to the bathroom and I saw the bathtub filled with water, everything inside me went cold and panicky. The water looked so deep, and for a second I couldn't breathe, couldn't think about anything except being held under the water as punishment for... "Riley?" Mrs. Lumina's voice seemed to come from very far away, pulling me from where my mind was spiraling. "Sweetie, what's wrong?" I realized I was pressed against the bathroom wall, my whole body shaking in fear as I swallowed hard, remembering how I begged my mama as she pulled me under the water for failing. Both Mr. Xenois and Mrs. Lumina was looking at me with worried faces, and Ollie was staring at me with wide eyes. "I'm sorry," I whispered, looking at them though I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. "You don't need to be sorry," Mr. Xenois said gently, as he knelt down to my level as he said, "Are you scared of the water?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "That's okay," Mrs. Lumina said softly as she came closer as well, her scent familiar and helping me relax as I breathed out, my body going all slack as she said, "Lots of people are scared of different things. Would it help if we made the water shallower?" She didn't ask me why I was scared. She didn't tell me I was being silly, or that big boys weren't supposed to be afraid of bathwater. She just wanted to help me feel better. They let some of the water out and added extra bubbles so that I wouldn't see the water. and Mr. Xenois sat on the edge of the tub the whole time, talking to both me and Ollie about funny things that had happened to him when he was our age. By the time we were clean and in our pajamas, I wasn't shaking anymore. Downstairs, we got to have ice cream for dessert, even though it was late. Mrs. Lumina had said that it was the best part of having a sleepover, whenever Ollie brought his friends over. I wouldn't know. Mama never allowed me to have friends. The whole time we were eating, I kept sneaking looks at Ollie. It was weird how much we looked alike. When I looked at him, it was almost like looking in a mirror. I wondered if the parents had noticed as well. They had to, right? Grown-ups noticed everything, but nobody said anything about it, so maybe it was just my imagination, and I was self-projecting. It wasn't just both of us that had black hair and green eyes. I had seen a lot of kids with those looks as well. Mama words about replacing Ollie was probably working now and giving me ideas about how I would fit right in. When it was time for bed, Ollie grabbed my hand again and pulled me toward the stairs. "You're sleeping in my room," he announced, "not the guest room." "Ollie," Mr. Xenois said patiently, "Riley might be more comfortable in his own space." "No," Ollie interrupted, shaking his head, which surprised me because I'd never heard him argue with his parents before. He always seemed to do whatever his parents said. "He needs to stay with me to keep the scary people away." His parents shared one of those looks that grown-ups shared when they were having a conversation, but not saying anything to anyone. "What scary people, buddy?" Mr. Xenois asked. Ollie looked at me, then back at his dad. "The ones that give kids nightmares. Riley needs someone to protect him from the scary dreams." I stared at him, my heart beating fast. How did he know about my nightmares? How did he know that sometimes I woke up scared and crying, and Mom would be angry because I'd disturbed her sleep? That I had learned how to cry without making a noise because Mama didn't like how weak I was when she hurt me. But it was my fault. I deserved it. "Is that true, Riley?" Mrs. Lumina asked gently as I looked at her as she said, "Do you have bad dreams sometimes?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Well then," she said, smiling at both of us, "I think staying together is a perfect idea. You two should always look out for each other." As we climbed into Ollie's bunk bed, both of us on the bottom like he'd suggested earlier, I felt safer than I had in my entire life. "Riley?" Ollie whispered in the dark. "Yeah? Are you glad you stayed?" "Yeah," I whispered back. "I'm really glad." "Good," Ollie said sleepily as I could see him rubbing his eyes trying to fight the sleep that was imminent. "Tomorrow we can play all day, and nobody will be mean to us." I slept off with his words echoing in my ears. Chapter 59. Food for thoughts. Lumina. The hot water rolled down my body from my hair as I stood in our master bathroom shower, finally allowing myself to have a moment to decompress from everything from what had to be one of the most stressful evenings of my life. I shook my head in resignation as I still remembered Sophia's scent that had clogged my nose and Sylvia's scatting remarks. I was also surprised a little by Xenois' behavior throughout this evening. He seemed to be the only person on my side. How ironic, and here I was expecting it to be only Samuel and his support would be polite indifference as usual. The steam rose around feeling like a protective barrier, and for the first time in hours, I could breathe without feeling like someone was watching every move that I did, waiting for me to make a mistake before insulting me. I leaned against the tile wall, letting the water wash away the tension that had been building in my muscles since the moment Sophia and Riley had walked through Sylvia's front door. The whole evening felt like a very vivid dream, like I'd been trapped in some kind of drama where everyone else knew their lines except me. What bothered me most wasn't just Sylvia's obvious to everyone manipulation or Sophia's fake acting at being a fragile single mother who definitely wants trying to steal my mate. What bothered me completely was Ollie's behavior tonight. My son, who had been cautious and a bit resistant and unaccepting Riley's presence during their previous playdate, had suddenly become the little boy's fierce protector, like a switch had been switched in him. The sleepover had been his idea, insisted upon with a lot of determination that I rarely saw from him. He wasn't backing down one bit at all. The way he'd used Sophia's own words against her, talking about bonding time and developing relationships between him and Riley, like they all wanted, was a bit manipulative, but honestly, it had been brilliant. And Sylvia fell for his line, hook, line, and sinker without seeing anything odd in it. It was almost too brilliant for a 5-year-old. It made me wonder how much of our adult conversations he'd been listening to while pretending otherwise, and how much he understood about the complex situation that was revolving around our family. Should I be proud of his quick thinking, or concerned that my kindergartner was already learning to manipulate situations to get what he wanted? The thought made my stomach clench with worry. Children shouldn't have to be that strategic at things like this, turning the situation to their advantage. They shouldn't be that aware of tension that was going on between adults in power plays. It seemed that Sylvia's influence was subconsciously rubbing off on him. But then again, I thought about the way Riley had looked when Sophia was preparing to take him home after the humiliation that she suffered, and way she was trying to act like she was all right. The way that Riley had positioned himself behind Ollie, like he was seeking protection from him and still leaving himself open so that it seemed natural to everyone who looked at him. The panic in his eyes when he looked at that bathtub full of water. The careful way he chose his words, as if he was always afraid of saying the wrong thing. Maybe Ollie's insistence on the sleepover hadn't been manipulation at all. Maybe it had been a genuine concern for another child who needed help for some reason. After all, I did have suspicion that Riley was being abused by Sophia, but I had no proof. The thought made my heart ache for both boys, for Riley, who seemed to be carrying burdens on his shoulders that no 5-year-old should bear, and for Ollie, who was somehow brilliant enough to recognize another child's pain. I closed my eyes and let the water run over my face, trying to wash away the image of Sophia's triumphant smile when Sylvia had fawned over her at dinner. The way she'd looked at Xenois with that mixture of longing and lust that made my skin crawl with disgust. And then there was whatever had happened on the balcony. I'd heard Sophia's cry, had seen her on the ground looking disheveled and shocked at something. Xenois had been standing over her, his face filled with anger. The official story was that she'd tripped, but something about the whole scene had felt wrong. Part of me wanted to ask Xenois what had really happened out there, that he should tell me the truth, that I wasn't Sylvia who believed him. But a bigger part of me was terrified of the answer that he might tell me, because deep down, I knew he still had feelings for Sophia. I'd seen the way he looked at her, the way his entire personality changed when she was around. If they'd been having some kind of intimate moment that had gone wrong. I shook my head, trying to shake away those thoughts from my mind. I couldn't go down that path because there was no use. It would only lead to more pain, more doubt, more of the insecurity that had been eating away at me for weeks. The sound of the bathroom door opening and closing made me freeze in place as I was a bit confused at why the door would be opening. I didn't need to turn around to know it was Xenois. His scent filled the air, that familiar combination of cedar and something that was uniquely him that had always made me feel safe and desired. I felt him step into the shower behind me, his warm hands touching on my shoulders. His lips found the sensitive spot where my neck met my shoulder, pressing soft kisses that made my breath catch despite everything that had happened tonight. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice sounding so low that I could barely hear myself. "Seeking some time with my mate," he murmured against my skin, his arms coming around me from behind,